Okay, well, Beloved on this version of the cover looks like Benedict Cumberbatch, but like clearly you can't do that because I don't think Benny C or like gave permission for his rights to be sold. However, that's his face, just with different hair.
Was he famous when that was released?
I don't know. Let me see what year this was published.
That version, I guess.
This is a 2015 version, so yeah, he was absolutely famous.
Well,
like they just changed his eye color and hair.
Just took a still from Sherlock.
Probably. That looks like the type of coat he wears in Sherlock. I'm just telling you that this was like some Photoshop, and it couldn't be AI because 2015 AI wasn't really.
That's not your internal view of Beloved now. Is Benedict Cumberbatch?
No.
Of Lord Golden?
No. No, two separate things. I do have a crush on Benedict Cumberbatch. I do like find him attractive, but not this version. I don't know.
Welcome back to another episode of Is Fitz Happy? I'm Luke.
And I'm Emma.
And we're discussing chapter 6 this week, The Quiet Years. I almost said chapter 7. And
Roman numerals really getting to you.
I know. That lack of a second eye. All right. So this is our second chapter with Beloved here.
It's called The Quiet Years.
I said that already. Yes.
Oh.
Thank you. And the epigraph this week is
I did not hear you say it.
You're too focused on me almost saying 7.
Yeah.
You had to jump in there right after I said The Quiet Years. You're like, Roman numerals.
Okay. I can't stop looking at me like that. Okay.
All I'm doing is looking at you.
The Quiet Years.
What's the title?
Okay.
Are you good?
No.
Love you.
I love you.
This epigraph is quite long for all the chapters that we've had so far. For me, it goes on to the second page. I don't know how long it is in your copy.
Yeah, it's almost a full 2 pages for my copy. So
yeah, the beginning paragraph of it basically just recaps Fitz's story through the whole thing. It just kind of sums up everything from his point of view, short sentences to the fact, and then beyond that, he kind of explains he's trying to 1, write a history of the Six Duchies, 2, write down his own story, and 3, just write various scrolls on different knowledge. And they're all very disparate kind of pursuits, but through all of them, he's trying to piece together why his life turned out the way it did.
Right. There is that sort of underlying searching there and sort of looking for an answer. And it's really interesting to read such a cut and dry, matter-of-fact statement of events. I think it is a really good tool to remind people what happened in the first trilogy if they're starting here and not having to go back and read 3 full books.
Yeah, and it's not the full-on explanations that we got in like Live Ship, you know, of each preceding book. Or even though it was done pretty well in Live Ship, I think we remarked in the later 2 books, but the first trilogy, you know, you would get like a paragraph or a couple pages of what happened in the previous book.
Yes. And we do still occasionally get some like callbacks to what has happened that are longer and sort of really lengthy explanations of last time in Buckkeep
sort
of vibe. But it's also the start of book 7 in a long, I don't, it's not a trilogy if there's
Long
more than 3
series.
books, but yeah, a long series. So I get the need to do that. And I just think it's getting, the way that she's doing it is becoming easier to read and
Right.
less
It doesn't
of a
stand out as
struggle.
much. And
Yeah.
I don't know if it's, publisher directed or editor directed, or if it's just something that she thinks she needs to do, or if this epigraph was just a part of his musings and not
Yeah.
really part of that kind of recap. But it's getting more opaque of what is actual recap and what is actual, this is the people saying information.
Yeah. No, and I guess 7 books in, you get better and better, it's
Yeah.
all a
Yeah.
learning process. But what I really find interesting about sort of the epigraphs as a whole is that there are quite a few that aren't labeled. Like this one isn't labeled. We know it's from Fitz because of the content of it.
Right.
But what's interesting to me is that there are some epigraphs in this book that are labeled like Badgerlock's studies on.
Yes.
So
Or a different book, or not
yeah,
labeled at all, but they're
not
about a specific topic that it doesn't necessarily have to be Fitz.
right. So I just find that really interesting that there is sort of that, sometimes we get who it's from, even though Badgerlock is Fitz.
Yeah.
It's sort of, we get to know if that makes it seem like somebody else is placing them in here.
Right. It's someone found Badgerlocks on Wit or whatever and
Yeah.
pulled out the excerpts.
Which is really interesting because there is a fan theory going around that this series is supposed to be B writing it.
Right. Yeah.
And that this is the story being told as Fitz is making his stone dragon.
Mhm.
I don't necessarily agree with that take, but I find that to lend itself towards that theory of like somebody
Yeah.
adding little epigraphs in between to try to help make sense of the world when they're writing down what somebody else said.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure if I fully subscribe to that theory either. We'll see when we get to
Yeah.
that point.
But I just thought that was really interesting and something I
Yeah.
had noticed. And since we're, 6 chapters in, I might as well just drop that in there a little bit.
So Fitz is kind of reflecting on the truth of his story and how he got to the point that he did and what happened and what was going on in the world to make those decisions happen, to make his life take those turns. And he remarks that the more he tries to find that truth, the more that it's hidden, and that he knows that one man is not supposed to see the truth of it all, of everything that is going on in the world. What had seemed clearly lit plunged into shadow, and details I had considered trivial leapt into prominence as he tries to find this truth of his story. And then he says, Burek the stable master, the man who had raised me, once warned me, when you cut pieces from the truth to avoid sounding like a fool, you end up sounding like a moron instead. I have discovered that to be true from first-hand experience. Yet even without deliberately attempting to cut and discard pieces of a story, years after giving a full and just accounting of an event, a man may discover himself a liar. Such lies happen not by intent, but purely by virtue of the facts he was not privy to at the time he wrote, or by being ignorant of the significance of trivial events. No one is pleased to discover himself in such a strait, but any man who claims never to have experienced it is but stacking one lie on top of another. And he goes on to explain a little bit in a different context that his attempt at writing a history of the Six Duchies is based on collecting oral accounts or old scrolls that he had
Right.
access to. And he's wondering if he's just committing to paper one other person's fiction, one other
Right.
person's error, and just perpetuating that. So
Yeah,
it is with his own life, maybe.
Yeah, and how it's just really hard to want to continue this history when you don't really know what the truth is. And like he said, it doesn't even need to be somebody maliciously making up a story in the past. They could have truly believed that happened, but they aren't aware of everything. And so it's just really hard to feel like you have the whole picture when you know that human nature is to cut things out of a story
Right.
because you don't think it's important, but maybe later that is the key detail that is needed. So, sort of talking about how, relating it to how a child sees that his life as an acorn, whereas the adult looks back and sees the whole of the oak tree.
Yeah. And this is an interesting introduction to this chapter for a couple reasons, I think. And one is because he's trying to give a full accounting to the fool in this chapter.
Yeah,
Right? He starts his story, and the fool will get there, but the fool impresses the importance on Fitz that I need to hear everything, please.
Yeah.
Everything that you can bear to tell me, because every little detail might be important. I don't know which one yet.
Right. I need to hear it to know.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that is sort of the point of starting with it, to realize that Fitz isn't super reliable as a narrator, but only because nobody is.
But also, I do want the other point of this is he's trying to write down. The other reason I think this epigraph is important, let me rephrase and start that so it's not confusing, is I think that he's trying to write his history at 35 now of what happened in the first trilogy and why it led that way. But we're at the point where, as rereaders, we know in this trilogy, he learns why some of those things happened. And he doesn't know those things because Illustor isn't really a character yet in his mind. He doesn't know that the Out Islanders were kind of directed into that. So it takes him almost his whole life in order to figure out the truth of what happened in the first trilogy, because there are things beyond his ken. He doesn't know those things. He doesn't know those trivial details. And in this book, he doesn't really know that the piebalds are also being directed by the same kind of groups.
Right.
Behind the scenes, and that also affects his life. So if he was trying to piece together all of the details, the whole truth of his story of why he made the choices he did or his life went the way it did, he at this point does not have all the information. So writing it down as he is, by omission, because he doesn't know the knowledge, he is writing down a false tale, a false history.
Right.
Or at least a true history, but a false reason why.
Right. And I think, yeah, that's a really interesting thing for Fitz to be worried about, just because, I don't know, it makes sense to me. I think that's who he is as a person, but it's really interesting to see him struggling with that sort of worry of not getting it right and wanting to make sure that he's not making things up and it's the true account.
Right.
And I don't know. I think there's also something a little bit funny in somebody trying to write their life history at 35 when they are healthy and not on the brink of death. Like it would be one thing if
we did talk about that before in the last episode of how he's lived a lot of lives. He has been through a lot, but
still he's a pretty hardy young man. I mean, I know he has like aches and bruises and has gone through trauma, but physically he's pretty healthy and is probably going to live a while yet. So it's a little bit humorous for him to be like, yes, I got to sit down and write my whole life, even though I haven't really lived it yet. Let me get it right. Oh, there's so much that I might get wrong. Like maybe just live a little bit more and then write it. I don't know.
Man, I can't believe if I was, that young and living with chronic pain in your back from an arrow wound and also have your skull broken so your hair grows silver at that point.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that chronic pain isn't bad, right? Like, it for sure would make things worse.
I was just reflecting on it. How, he's not at the end of his rope, but also
he's weary.
Yeah, for sure. So we jump into this chapter as Fitz is reflecting on the Fool, basically, and how the Fool just kind of joins their lives. He doesn't intrude upon it. Fitz doesn't make any adjustments to his schedule or anything. The Fool just fit himself into it. He simply joined us, setting his schedule to ours and making my own work his. He was invariably stirring before I was. I would awake to find the door of my study and my bedroom door open, and like as not, the outside door open as well. From my bed, I would see him sitting cross-legged like a tailor on my chair before my desk. He was always washed and dressed to face the day. His elegant clothes disappeared after that first day, replaced with simple jerkins and trousers, or the evening comfort of a robe. The moment I was awake, he was aware of my presence and would lift his eyes to mine before I spoke. He was always reading, either the scrolls or documents that I had painstakingly acquired, or those composed by me. Some of those scrolls were my failed attempts at a history of the Six Duchies. Others were my disjointed efforts to make sense of my own life by setting it onto paper. He would lift an eyebrow to my wakefulness and then carefully restore the scroll to precisely where it had been. Had he chosen to do so, he could have left me ignorant of his perusal of my journals. Instead, he showed his respect by never questioning me about what he had read. The private thoughts that I had committed to paper remained private, my secrets sealed behind the fool's lips.
This is really interesting to me because I really feel as though Fitz would never let anyone else do that.
Correct?
Even
Yeah.
if they didn't say anything, he would be so anxious of how they're going to use that knowledge. Like, think about when Jenna accidentally found out he's witted. His mind immediately went to, how is she going to use this against me? Like, how is this going to come to bite me in the butt later? And she doesn't say a word about it. She just says, oh, I'm so sorry. I should have thought. And then moves on. And he's relieved that she's moving on. But that sort of wariness doesn't let go. And I understand that that's a little bit different because he doesn't really know Jenna. But in the same way, I feel like that's just how he reacts to everyone. It's always this sort of, how are they going to use this? Like, how will this be used against me later? How will this information change dramatically the way somebody feels about me and how they're going to act towards me? And how will that make them disappoint me?
Yeah.
But with the fool, it doesn't matter.
Once again, he reiterates that the fool dropped effortlessly into his life. While he stayed with me, I almost forgot to mishap, save that I hungered so to show the boy off to him. I know I spoke often of him. Then we have little kind of vignettes of his life and doing the chores with the fool. Either the fool joins him, or if it's a one-man task, the fool will just kind of sit there and talk to him. And they're not always talking deeply of things. It's just of the task at hand, of making jokes, of passing time.
Yeah.
Nothing's really deep until evening.
Right. And it's not even when evening hits that it becomes deep, because sometimes in the evening, that's when it's Fool's turn to take over entertaining. And he
Yeah.
will sing songs or tell tales. And sometimes the tales are his own recounting of what he's been through. But a lot of the times they're sort of folklore he's picked up along his journeys. So it is companionable, and it is sort of, I don't want to say like a repayment, but it is that sort of back and forth where Fitz tells his stories during the day and Fool tells them during the night. But then after a certain time in the night, it does sort of settle down. And it's one of those nights when the Fool sort of brings up that it was really hard for him to leave Fitz when he left on Girl on Dragon.
Yes. I had to believe that the wheels were in motion, and you would live. It taxed my faith in myself to the utmost to fly off and leave you there. Your faith in yourself, I demanded, feigning insult. Had you no faith in me? The fool had spread Hap's bedding on the floor before the hearth, and we had abandoned our chairs to sprawl in the dubious comfort there. The wolf, his nose on his paws, dozed on my left side, while on my right the fool leaned on his elbows, chin propped in his hands. He gazed into the fire, his lifted feet waving vaguely. The last flames of the fire danced merrily in his eyes. In you? Well, I shall say only that I took great comfort in the wolf at your side. In that his confidence was not misplaced, the wolf observed wryly. I thought you were asleep. I'm trying to be. The fool's voice was almost dreamy as he went on. You had survived every cataclysmic event that I had ever glimpsed for you. So I left you, forcing myself to believe that there was a period of quiet in store for you, perhaps even a time of peace. Fitz says there was after a fashion, and this is where Fitz takes his prompt. He's going to start filling the fool in on what happened. And to the readers, he remarks that he almost tells the fool of his death watch with Will, standing next to Will that whole time as Will was dying. Or even, skilling into Regal's mind, but he skips that. Fitz starts with, I found peace a bit at a time in pieces. I grinned foolishly to myself. The small things that are amusing when one has had enough to drink. And he finds himself speaking of his year in the mountains. So they go back to those hot spring areas, and Fitz builds a hut for the winter that, they can live in for the year.
Yeah, he talks about how up in the mountains, the seasons change more quickly. So it felt like one day the leaves were just starting to turn colors, and then a few days later, they were completely gone and the branches were bare, and it was time for winter again.
So Fitz tells the fool of his hunting days with Nighteyes as his sole companion. Healing and peace were the most elusive of the prey I stalked. We lived simply as predators with no loyalties save to one another. That absolute solitude was the best balm for the wounds I had taken to both my body and my soul. Such injuries do not truly heal, but I learned to live with my scars, much as Burek once learned to tolerate his game leg. So they hunt for a long time, just him and Nighteyes, and eventually, he comes to terms in his mind that Molly is no longer just his. And
that Fitz's chivalry has died.
Yes, exactly. And that during those days, he tried to rid himself of his memories of Molly. So he would think about all of those times with Molly, all the brief days that they had together.
He also talks a little bit about how some of the pain was cushioned by knowing the pain of losing his daughter, which is something he also was trying to think about and heal from, was cushioned knowing that his daughter would be lovingly raised by Burek the same way he was.
Yeah.
And so that brought him a little bit of comfort, but ultimately it wasn't, it's still he lost a daughter and didn't get to be in her life. And so that was hard for him as well. And then, yeah, he keeps thinking of Molly in their old times.
He thinks about his past and the life that he left behind, that the people who know he's alive are pretty much counted on one hand. It's the Fool, Queen Ketcherkin, Starling, and through those three, Chade knows he's alive. Those were the four who knew of his existence, and then a few others had seen him alive, Hans and Tag Reaverson, but they were very unlikely to be believed.
Right, if they told tales. However, isn't Tag Reaverson the one whose son...
Tag's son is the bard that said,
Yeah.
I got this in the Wit Town or whatever.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, like he said, it wasn't believed, so I guess.
So he came to terms with that he couldn't return to Burek and Molly. To do so would destroy all of us. Even if Molly had been able to tolerate my beast magic and my many deceptions of her, how could any of us untangle her subsequent marriage to Burek? To confront Burek with his usurpation of my wife and my child would destroy him. Could I found future happiness on that? Could Molly? And then he says out loud, I tried to comfort myself with the thought that they were safe and happy. Could not you reach out with the skill to assure yourself of that? I could claim I learned the discipline to leave them to their privacy. In truth, I think I feared it would drive me mad to witness love shared between them. So he says he finds peace little by little, day by day, and yet Nighteyes is the one to point out the big truth for him that he found in the mountains.
Right. And before that truth is revealed, I just want to point out that there's sort of this reoccurring theme for Fitz that he has to stay hidden. There's no possible way that him coming back would turn out well. And the main reason for that, because I feel like sometimes he'll have a reason why it wouldn't work out for Ketcherkin or Chade or whoever else, but the main reason is always Molly and Burek. Like, sure, yeah, it might make Ketcherkin have a harder time ruling if he came back, but ultimately he cares more about the fact that he wouldn't really get Molly back, and then it would just make things awkward because Burek would step away from Molly probably, and then how would Molly, and obviously Molly would take him back, and then it would be awkward for everybody for that whole time period, which I always find interesting because I think Burek absolutely would try to step away if he had come back right away.
Yeah.
However, I don't think Molly would have let Burek walk away, and I don't
No.
think she would have taken back Fitz. I think she would have let him see his daughter.
Right.
I don't think she would have taken him back.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really important thing, that like Fitz has this all decided in his head. And interestingly, never once does he think that Molly wouldn't take him back. He thinks it will be hard for her and that it will be a little awkward, but he doesn't even imagine a scenario where he doesn't get Molly back. You know what I mean?
I do see in the question, could I found future happiness on that? Could Molly? I see in that short question right there a little bit of that. It's like, could she deal with Burek stepping away and getting back together with me? I see a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Would she be willing to do that? Maybe it's not fully facing the truth of that. Like, she probably wouldn't.
Right.
But I see a little bit of that doubt in his mind.
Yeah, and
that.
I don't want to make it seem like he's like horrible for thinking in this way,
Just like
or
arrogant and being like, yeah, she'd take me back.
I don't think it's that. I think he just like can't fathom that she doesn't feel the same way about him the way he does about her. Like, he has never once in these books that I'm aware of, maybe later at the end of this trilogy, but as far as I'm aware, he doesn't ever really truly consider what Molly has went through when they were children. Like, he lied to her a lot, and most of them she found out about. Not all of them, but a lot of the lies she found out about and stayed with him. And he just like kept not putting her first. And in his mind, he was putting her first. And we know that he loved her and cared about her. But if you think about it from Molly's perspective, that guy's trash. If my friend told me about Fitz, like what Fitz was doing to her, I'd be like, girl, get out. Like, that is not a healthy relationship.
He does not love you.
No. So it's hard because we do have Fitz's perspective. We do know that he does love her in his way. It just like, he doesn't really seem to understand how maybe that's not enough.
Right.
And also, I think it really speaks to his partial forging that he continues to like put her on this pedestal and see her as this perfect woman from his childhood that couldn't have changed at all. And he still likes her eventually. They get back together, spoiler alert, and he likes her and they have a relationship. But
good spoiler warning right
thank
there.
You, yeah. Because, people on episode 253, maybe they don't know. No, but I just think that like they do grow together, and I think he gets a more realistic view and they do find that love again, and it's different. It just is really interesting to me how much of this pining after Molly is such a specific idealization version of Molly that really ignores all of her anger and frustration with him at the end.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, Nighteyes points out that he's healing.
Yeah, so Fitz recalls a very vivid memory. He and Nighteyes were coming back from a hunt to their cabin in the mountains that he had built. They're coming back with a goat that they had successfully hunted. It was a hard hunt, but successful. And they're coming down a crest and see the cabin in the distance, that little hut. And both of them think home. We're coming back home. And there's that sense of peace that comes with that word. A finality, a place to belong. The humble cottage was home now, a comforting destination where I expected to find all I needed. As I stood staring down at it, I felt a twinge of conscience, as for some forgotten obligation. It took me a moment to grasp what was missing. The whole of a night had passed, and I had not thought once of Molly. Where had my yearning and sense of loss gone? What sort of shallow fellow was I, to let go of that morning, and think only of the dawn's hunting? Deliberately, I turned my thoughts to the place and the people who were once encompassed in the word home. When I wallow in something dead to reawaken the savor of it, you rebuke me. I turned to look at Nighteyes, but he refused the eye contact. He sat in the snow, ears pricked forward toward our hut. The unpleasant little winter wind stirred his thick ruff, but could not penetrate to his skin. Meaning? I pressed him, though his meaning was perfectly clear. You should leave off sniffing the carcass of your old life, my brother. You may enjoy unending pain. I do not. There is no shame in walking away from bones, changer. He finally swiveled his head to stare at me from his deep-set eyes. Nor is there any special wisdom in injuring oneself over and over. What is your loyalty to that pain? To abandon it will not lessen you. Then he had stood, shaken his coat free of snow, and trotted resolutely down the snowy hillside. I had followed him more slowly.
So this is really sort of a theme that we see in Hobb's work a lot, especially when it comes to sort of trauma and dealing with loss and trauma. And it really, in this moment, reflected to me a more drawn out version of what happened with Althea at the end of the last trilogy, where she's been assaulted and she's hanging on to that pain because if she lets go, then it didn't happen and it's not real.
Right.
And this isn't exactly the same, but it is similar in that there is that sort of need to poke at the hurt, to reopen the wound, because you don't deserve to not feel that wound. It makes
Right.
it less than that you have
Moved on, I guess. Yeah, Fitz doesn't think about Molly, so he's like deliberately thinking about, oh, all these people think I'm dead.
Yeah, let me
All
make
these
myself
people-
sad on purpose.
Yes, exactly. And Nighteyes is like, you don't need to do that, dude.
Yeah, it's
Chill.
fine. It's fine to walk away. Like, if you're going to walk away, do it. Don't
Mm-hmm.
sit there and mope about it and whatever, which is, harsh words. But I think it came from a moment, and it's very similar to Paragon's words, of like, I believe you, I'm here, it did happen, it was important. You don't need to keep holding it so tightly.
Yeah. And Fitz says that to the fool, basically, like, that's the first sort of piece I found, and I can't take credit for it because Nighteyes pointed it out to me. Maybe it's obvious to other people, but leave old pains alone. When they cease coming to call, do not invite them back. And that's kind of the simple truth that he's first learned in that year in the mountains.
And interestingly, Fool also gives reassurance here. He says, there is nothing dishonorable about abandoning pain. Sometimes peace is most quickly found when a man simply stops avoiding it. And you never again lay awake at night staring at darkness and thinking of them. And then Fitz says, I wish.
Yeah.
But the most I can say is I stopped deliberately provoking that melancholy, which is big. That's big growth for Fitz, our little Fitzy boy.
And he says that when summer finally came after that winter, it was like casting off, a shed skin, basically. So you left the mountains and came back to Buck. He knew I had not. It was just his little prod to get me talking again. And then Fitz tells on what they did. Nighteyes didn't approve of this, but Fitz retraced his steps through Assassin's Quest, basically.
Yeah.
There was different things. He went back to the quarry first.
Right. And the quarry was the hardest, he says, because there was no sign of what they had done, really. Like the space where the rock that had been carved by Verity was completely clean and gone. And
They're just piles of chips and a few worn tools.
yeah. And it was like it never happened. And it wasn't really until he found Carad's body that made him really realize that this had happened. And Carad was just bones at this point because he had died on the Skill Road or part of the Skill Rock. And so animals hadn't come close to it at all. And it really made him realize, like, this did happen. It is over.
He did take the pieces of the stone game from their camp in the quarry.
Yes.
Kettle's stone game.
He does pick through sort of the rubble left.
Yeah, but that was like the only thing that still held somewhat of a meaning. Otherwise, it was just bits of fabric moldering. So yeah, he looks at Carad's bones for a while, trying to remember what Carad had been like when he first met him. And that was probably during the Galen's skill lessons the first
Yeah.
time.
And he can't even remember that.
Yeah. But looking at his bones was like a confirmation. It all had truly happened, and it all was truly finished. I could leave it behind now, and it could not get up and follow me.
Then they go down to the stone garden, and he sees that all of the dragons had returned and that the foliage is starting to grow up around them again. It's not obviously as deep as it was when they first found them, but
Yeah.
it is growing again. There are vines and tall grass everywhere.
The canopy is a little bit broken because the stone dragons had to fly out and then come back.
Mm-hmm.
So there's shafts of light all around as well. But it's still as beautiful as when he first went there. And he finds King Wisdom's antlered dragon. He dared set his bare hand to his shoulder and felt only the finely carved scales, cold and hard as the stone as they had been fashioned from. They were all there. The boar dragon, the winged cat, all the widely divergent forms carved by both elderlings and skill coteries. Which, that kind of peaked in my mind. I can't remember. Does Fitz know that they elderlings carved these dragons too?
I feel like he would know because he's the one who woke them up. That's but we only
if they like communicated with him that?
Yeah. I mean, even if they didn't say we were elderling born, I feel like you would be able to tell the difference between elderlings and humans.
Yeah. Because
And-
we find out, I thought we found out as first time readers in the live ship traders during the memories that Malta gets.
That's the first direct confirmation. Like, she sees elderlings carving because that's what the Rooster Cavern is, right? Is where they used to carve the stone dragons. However, I feel as though they thought that the dragons were elderlings. And I think
that's what
I think Kettle does make mention that it's a
Okay.
tradition from elderling time. Like, I could be
Okay.
wrong. I think it's like a one-off thing, but it's more detailed in the last book.
So there are
Or last trilogy.
some hints that may have Fitz kind of piece it together that these were not elderlings themselves and they were carved by something else.
Right. I mean, there's a chance that the skill users learned it from elderlings and that Kettle knew and told Fitz, right? Like, I don't think we get a whole big explanation last book. I'm just inferring. I don't think it's like unreasonable he know, but you're right.
You're trying
It's-
to come up with an in-universe explanation for it.
why he would know. Yeah.
I just
I-
think from the text it might be a leap that we haven't seen from him before. So that's why I wanted
That's
to point
true.
that out.
Yeah. No, definitely. I don't specifically remember when Kettle talks about it.
Yeah.
So I don't know for sure. She might have said something, but if she didn't know, we don't really, he shouldn't know.
Mhm.
But there are ways to believe that he knows.
Fitz also says that he saw a girl on a dragon there. She sleeps well. The human figure is sprawled forward now, her arms twined lovingly around the neck of the dragon she bestrides still. Her I had feared to touch. I recalled too clearly her hunger for memories and how I had fed her with mine. Perhaps I feared as much to regain what I once had willingly given her. I slipped past her silently, but Nighteyes stalked past her, hackles a-bristle, showing every white tooth he possessed in a snarl. The wolf had known what I truly sought. Verity, the fool said softly, as if confirming my unspoken thought. Verity, I agreed, my king. I sighed and took up my tale. So Fitz finds Verity there. Verity's turquoise hide gleaming in the dappling summer shade. Nighteyes sat down and curled his tail tidily around his forefeet. He would come no closer. Fitz feels silence of Nighteyes' thoughts as he carefully granted him the privacy of mind. And so he approaches Verity-as-Dragon and asks after him, Verity? My soul strained toward him, word, wit, and skill seeking for my king. I did not find him. His hands upon him, he strives towards Verity with all of his might, all of his magics, begging him, Verity, please, and reached yet again with every drop of the skill that was in him,
With
and
a physical touch, yeah.
with a physical touch, and he collapses.
He sensed him then, but it was far and thin. It was a far and thin glimpse of what had been.
Yep. He's gone, he tells Nighteyes after he wakes up. Verity's gone. And so Fitz finally mourns. He weeps, and he decides that if Verity in any form had been there, he could have gone back to Fitz chivalry.
Right.
But since he was gone, there's no use.
There's
no reason
reason
to.
Yeah. Which is really sad. I mean, it's all horribly sad, but it's really sad to me that that was sort of his last ditch attempt to give himself an excuse to go back to his loved ones.
But also, the way he frames it and the way he couches this, like I could go back to Fitz chivalry, is by saying, if Verity had remained in some form I could reach, if he had still existed to partner me in the skill, then I think some part of me would have wanted to remain Fitz chivalry farseer. It's still that addiction that I need to have somebody to link to me in the skill. And this is the same kind of wanting that Verity wanted all of his adult life.
Yeah.
And he was forced to use the skill because his father could no longer link him.
Right.
After chivalry died, there was no other trained skill user that could fulfill that because he wasn't going to link with Galen.
Right. And he did link with Fitz, but Fitz was so untrained that it probably wasn't as satisfying.
Exactly.
But also, if you think about it, that's probably the reason why Fitz so badly wants this link, because think of the years he spent linked mentally to Verity.
Yeah, at least a couple.
Over and over. And even when he goes to find Verity, I think, isn't he still tenuously linked? It's not the same as before, but there still is that link.
Right.
And so, and we know that skill is addictive. So I can only imagine how much more addictive it is to be constantly fed something and then just be cut off cold turkey and never get it again. I don't know. I just feel really bad for him because it's like an aspect I hadn't thought of, I guess, of how what was done out of necessity really did have lasting effects to Fitz.
Yeah, for sure. He says, the end of my king was also the end of me.
I also feel sorry for him because he finally gets this chance to mourn and he has to do it alone. I don't know. And also the fact that that means that there was just that little bit of hope in him that Verity wasn't truly gone. That's why he didn't mourn Verity when he left, because, well, Verity's still around.
Right, yeah.
But
he felt a little bit connection when he talked to him or whatever. And now Verity's sleeping again. Verity-as-Dragon.
Mm-hmm.
So Fitz says that, well, I could rediscover who I truly was in a time to which to live my own life as I chose. From now on, I alone would make my decisions. Almost, the wolf derided me. I ignored him to speak to the fool. I stopped at one more place before we left the mountains. I think you will recall it. The pillar where I saw you change. And that's the skill pillar, although they did not know what it was before then.
Right.
But it was a skill pillar where the fool jumped up onto it and Fitz had a flashback. And the fool did too.
Yes.
About being in those olden times where another white prophet was...
with another catalyst.
Yes, with another catalyst was on top of that, doing something, but wearing a rooster crown with rooster feathers in it.
Yes.
He says that it was a teeming marketplace where the fool had perched atop a stone pillar. A woman stood, like him in white skin and near colorless eyes. In that other place and time, she had been crowned with a wooden circlet carved with rooster heads and decorated with tail feathers. Like the fool, her antics had held the crowd's attention. All that I had glimpsed in a moment, like a brief glance through some otherworldly window. Then, in the blinking of an eye, it had all changed back, and I had seen the stunned fool topple from his precarious perch. Yet he seemed to have shared that brief vision of another time and folk. The mystery of that moment was what drew me back to that place. The black monolith that presided over that circle of stones stood impervious to moss or lichen. the glyphs carved in its faces beckoning me to destinations unknown. I knew what it was now for what it was, a skill gate.
And he looks at the markings and he knows that he thinks he knows which one would take him to the Elderling city.
Yes.
And he's about to touch it, but Nighteyes doesn't let him. Nighteyes does not want him to even touch it with puppy's curiosity, he calls it, because he doesn't want something to happen. And he says, brother, I will follow you into the darkness that stone brings if I must, and your life depends on it, but do not make me do that again.
Exactly. Yeah, he grabs Fitz's wrist and pulls with his jaw, and Fitz falls back to prevent his wrist from ripping.
Right. And he tries to say, I didn't intend to use it. I was only going to touch it.
Would you mind if I went to the city for a short time, alone? Alone? You know there is no true alone for either of us anymore. I let you go alone to try a time with the wolf pack. It is not at all the same, and you know it. I did. He released my wrist, and I stood and brushed myself off. We spoke no more about it. That is one of the best things about the wit. There is absolutely no need for long and painfully detailed discussions to be sure of understanding one another.
I think it's so interesting. I've said that 800 times this episode at least, but I like the little detail of it's so nice to have the wit because then you don't have to have the long drawn out conversations. That is such an introvert thing, I think. That has to be because I can't imagine. I love drawn out conversations, making sure everybody understands fully. Sometimes they're not fun, but I love the chatter. I love to chat. And Fitz is like, yeah, we only need to have that one little word. And
then you understand exactly what the other person is getting at, the point behind it, everything.
It would be useful to know that everybody knew exactly what you meant and your intentions behind words. However, I do love a chat, so.
So then Fitz recaps that how Nighteyes had once left him for a pack of wolves for a bit. But then he came and joined Fitz again under the unspoken assertion that he belonged more with Fitz than he did with them, with the other wolves. In the years since, we had grown ever closer. As he had once pointed out to me, I was no longer completely a man, nor was he a wolf, nor were we truly separate entities. This was not a case of him overriding my decision. It was more like debating with myself as to the wisdom of an action. Yet in that brief confrontation, we both faced what we had avoided considering. Our bond was becoming deeper and more complicated. Neither of us was certain of how to deal with it. So then Nighteyes and Fitz share a look, and they both understand, they both have this misgiving about telling the next part of their story because both of them have that deep understanding. And yet Nighteyes gives Fitz the permission to make the decision or not of telling about the old blood.
Right.
Because they don't know whether that's their story to tell because it's not entirely just their secrets.
Right. And I think that's the big part of it. Fitz continuously says in his mind that the old blood, he himself doesn't mind Fool knowing that he is old blood or what he and Nighteyes talk about or how they talk or whatever he knows. But whenever it's coming to talking about a specific place that he went that were full of old blood people who taught him very specific cultural things, it's different because it's their cultural ways. And even if Fitz doesn't fully live by everything that they gave him, it's still very important to those people, and it feels like something they wouldn't just tell an outsider, somebody who isn't old blood.
Especially in the political climate in the Six Duchies right now.
Right.
It's not just his life that he's putting into the Fool's hands, it's the whole community's.
Right. And so it's sort of this back and forth of, sure, I trust the Fool with my life, and I don't care, but
I don't have the permission to entrust the lives of this whole village to the Fool, even though I believe the Fool would take care of them.
Yeah.
That's not for me to give.
Right. Which is a really interesting sort of decision to have to make of at what point does that relationship continue or stop the tale. So he's really struggling with this sort of letting an outsider in to something, and he doesn't usually care. But this specifically is well, it's not just me, so
But Fitz hesitates here. He doesn't really know how to proceed. And the fool gets up. He gestures to Fitz, and Fitz doesn't know how he's interpreting his hesitation. I suspect he took it for something other than my own uncertainty. You are right, the fool declared abruptly. He lifted his cup and drained off the last of his brandy and sets it down and holds out a finger, basically saying, wait. As if drawn by a puppeteer's strings, he flowed fluidly to his feet. So he goes to his pack, rustles through it, and a short time later returns with a canvas sack. He unveils from the canvas something wrapped up in a beautiful flowing piece of fabric. I gasped as he undid the folds of it. Never had I seen so liquid a fabric, nor so intricate a design worked in such brilliant colors. Even in the muted light of the dying fire, the reds blazed and the yellows shimmered. With that length of textile, he could have purchased the favor of any lord. Yet this wondrous cloth was not what he wished to show me. So this is obviously elderling cloth of some sort. I just had the thought, and I wish I had the thought earlier so I could have looked it up. Is this the tent that he has later? The elderling tent?
Oh.
Or is this just
I think it's
some
just
sort of
elderling fabric.
Okay.
I don't think it's a tent.
Okay.
I could be wrong.
Because he has the tent later, and I think it has roosters and stuff on it, which would be reds and yellows. But I don't know.
Yeah, but Fitz doesn't say red or yellow, and he doesn't say there's roosters, does he? He just
Even
says
in the
there's...
muted light of the dying fire, the reds blazed and the yellows shimmered.
Oh.
So I took that as red and yellow colored fabric. So I don't know. That's just an offhand thought that I had just now. So
Yeah, I mean, it could be. There's no reason it could. It just feels like not enough fabric, but also it's magic elderling fabric, so what do I know?
True. So he unwound this wondrous cloth from what it protected, heedless of how the glorious stuff pooled to the rough floor beside him. I leaned closer, holding my breath to see what greater wonder it might reveal. The last supple length of it slithered away. I leaned closer, puzzled, to be sure of what I was seeing. I thought I had dreamed that, I said at last. You did. We did. The wooden crown in his hands showed the wear of years. Gone were the bright feathers and paint that had once lent it color. It was a simple thing of carved wood, skillfully wrought, but austere in its beauty. So he reveals the rooster crown,
Yes.
the rooster circlet that he had found. Fitz asks if he had it made, and the fool's like, no, it found me. Or I found it, or I guess it found me. I watched him for him to say more, but he did not. I put out a hand to touch it, and he made a tiny motion as if to keep it to himself. An instant later, he relented. As I took it into my hands, I realized that in sharing this, he offered me far more of himself, even more than the sharing of his horse. I turned the ancient thing in my hands, discovering traces of bright paint still trapped in the graven lines of the rooster heads.
There's still two heads that have
Gems in the eyes.
Gems in the eyes, and it's really interesting. There's the holes where the feathers should be, but he says specifically, I did not know what wood it was carved from. Light but strong, it seemed to whisper against my fingers, hissing secrets in a tongue I did not know. And I'm just wondering, because we know as rereaders that in this rooster crown, or I suppose in the feathers of the rooster crown, are the lives and memories of performers who were extremely skilled. It was an honor to get to be put in the crown.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, because I'm pretty sure the feathers are also wooden.
Yes.
Is this the only example we have of skill wrought wood?
Is it wizard wood?
Well, he doesn't mention that it's gray.
True.
And there is flaking paint. So why would they paint wizard wood? It would be able to just look whatever color you wanted once it's alive.
Yeah. My thought is that the wizard wood would hold the memories.
Okay.
But it doesn't necessarily have to be, I suppose. And there might be skill wrought wooden toys, as to your other question.
Right.
But this might be a direct evidence of something that was not just a toy and made for a use
Yeah.
with more magic in it than just, a rattle that never fades or something,
Right. Well, I also ask because I don't think wizard wood would be allowed to be used. Like, if you think about Elderlings creating this, why would they steal? I know they weren't supposed to necessarily use the silver for working. They did hide that. But why would they steal pieces of a cocoon for these dragons that they love and understand that that's
See,
memories?
they wouldn't steal it though.
You
Is
think a
my
dragon
point.
gave them?
Yeah, because there are very, I think it's talked about in the Rainwild Chronicles that there are very rare things where like a dragon will give somebody a scale or,
Right.
like very rare favor bestowed on people. So maybe this particular dragon did not hatch and died, and the dragons had to eat the cocoon to save
Right.
the memories or whatever, but like saved a piece and gave it to some word worker that was, I don't know, favored of them. Who knows?
True.
That would be my thought if this was wizard wood.
Right. But it is interesting that he says that it almost whispers to him in a language he doesn't understand, because
Yeah.
we do know that sort of on the skill road with those memories of the old Elderlings, like they're speaking a different language. That's a old forgotten language. And so I do like that idea that this is sort of those memories whispering to him even without the feathers.
Yeah.
If it is the wizard wood, it makes sense too then that it would be more like the dragon memories maybe whispering to him, and that's why he doesn't quite understand it. And I mean, it's not like he's using it for its intended purpose, so it wouldn't speak more.
Right.
But it's odd to me that Fool doesn't hear anything. That, I guess we don't know.
We
He
don't know
could.
that.
Yeah, who knows?
He knew immediately what it was when he found it.
That's true.
But yeah, I don't know. My first thought was that it was wizard wood, but
Although,
I really don't know why they would use something with dragon memories and like not consume it.
Yeah, and wouldn't Paragon have noticed that it was wizard wood and not given it to Amber? Because
Maybe.
Amber showed him the crown and let him hold it.
Yeah.
And he said, it's nice wood or whatever.
Yeah.
So I would think that he would recognize it as wizard wood if it was.
But also if it was skill wrought, you would think a live ship would sense that too, because it would be made with liquid skill.
Well, the dragons don't react to the skill wrought roads.
The live ships, I'm saying though.
Well, yeah, but
because the live ships react strongly to silver.
how have they had any? It's not pure silver. The silver's already worked into the thing.
Yeah, I know. Just like, I would think that they would be sensitive to it though. That would be my assumption, since they turn into dragons with enough silver.
Well, yeah, but I feel like they wouldn't know that there was silver in it because there are objects found from the Elderling cities on live ships all the time, and none of them make comment on the skill worked into those objects. You know what
True.
I mean?
Yeah, that's true. I don't know.
I don't know either. Just thoughts. Who knows? Either way, it's a really cool old thing.
Yeah.
They both remember, and Fitz urges Fool to put it on.
Yeah, he hands it back and put it on. Like, are you sure? I've tried it upon my head, I will admit. Nothing happened. But with both of us here, the White Prophet and his catalyst, Fitz, it may be that we tempt a magic neither one of us understands. Time and again I have searched my memory, but in no prophecy I was ever taught did I find mention of this crown. I have no idea what it signifies, or if it signifies anything at all. You recall your vision of me. I have only the haziest of memories of it, like a butterfly of a dream, too fragile to recapture, yet wondrous in its flight. It says nothing, and eventually the fool does try it on. With a reckless grin, he sets it on his head. Nothing happened. I stared at him, torn between relief and disappointment. For an instant, silence held between us, and then he began to snicker, and they both fall to laughing.
Yeah. So nothing happened. It is a little goofy. It is very dramatic in this moment of, we don't know, the magics were tempting. This could be disastrous or wonderful. We don't know. And then nothing happens. It is very funny. But also, I think it's sort of this weird moment of, you do want something to happen. You want there to be a reason the fool found it.
Right. Yeah.
And
in the presence of Fitz, it has to happen like this.
This has
right?
to be. Yeah. I remember thinking, reading this the first time, like, it's going to do something. Something's going to happen.
Mhm.
But no.
It's going to do something, and then they'll need to find the rooster feathers.
Yeah. They'll
and
like
that'll
get a
be
hint.
the MacGuffin, the quest of these books or something,
No. And as they're laughing, Fitz sort of offers that there are rooster feathers he could give the fool to place in the spots if he'd like to try again with feathers there.
Yeah. And the fool's like, well, maybe I'll borrow some of your inks and paint it.
Yeah.
Too.
But interesting to me that Fool mentions that he barely remembers that moment. He doesn't have the vivid memory that Fitz does, that Fitz has kept all this time. And I was wondering if that's because he gave that memory to Girl on Dragon on accident.
Potentially.
He had to have given so many memories.
Yeah. The fool, I can't remember what the timing of it, but he was also a little bit befuddled during that time as well. And then he was also taken over by Regal's coterie for a bit, but I think that was after that point. I don't remember.
No way to know. Fool does ask Fitz for his opinion on the colors he should paint the crown if he decides to go through with painting it. And Fitz brushes it off and says, oh, you have a better eye for that than me, which is really interesting if you remember that Fool literally just said, I barely remember the memory. And Fitz knows for a fact that he remembers it. But then I also had to remind myself that Fitz is blind ? Not blind, but has really bad eyesight, because if I think back to when he draws the picture of the dog that he gets from Patience, he draws once what he sees and it's sort of blurry and fuzzy, and then once with what he senses from the dog and it's more accurate, has more details. And so I wonder if he just didn't see the details because he can't, or that's my own personal tinfoil hat theory, is that he needs glasses. But
interesting. I don't get that from him. I just think he's like we've talked before in the first book, his senses are always reliant upon the wit.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily that he can't see, he just
doesn't
thinks it's an inferior sense. So I don't think he pays attention as much unless he's specifically trying with Chade's remembered training.
Right.
You know?
Fair enough. I don't know. I just always, for some reason, this is such a random thing for me to throw in there. I just have always felt like he needs glasses and has never admitted to it. And he doesn't think he does, because with the wit, he doesn't need glasses. He knows where everything is. He's not running into anything. He knows who people are and what they are and what's going on.
True.
I don't know.
Maybe he's just blind.
Not fully.
Stumbling
just
around.
Needs, a -2 glasses prescription or something. Not too bad, not too good.
Same with Jenna.
Yeah.
They're on the same.
I think Jenna needs more of a heavier prescription, but and clearly they don't have glasses because Jenna can't see and she doesn't have them. So,
well, they don't even have glasses in their windows. How are you expecting to have glass on your face?
True. See, barbarians.
So, Fool kind of grabs the fabric again and begins to rewrap the crown. And Fitz looks at him for a long moment. In this light, I could pretend his coloring had not changed and that he was white-skinned gesture of my boyhood, and hence that I was still as young as he was. He glanced over at me, caught my eyes on him, and stared back at me, a strange avidity in his face. His look was so intense I glanced aside from it. A moment later, he spoke. So, after the mountains, you went... I picked up my brandy cup and it was empty. Wondering how much he drank, he's suddenly like, well, maybe tomorrow. We'll do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Cool. I need to get it ordered in my head before I can tell it to you.
And also he's giving himself a little bit more time to decide what to do with the conundrum of whether or not he gives away other people's secrets.
And here's where we circle back to the beginning of this episode, because the fool says, "Ponder, Fitz, but as you do so, do not forget." Words suddenly seemed to fail him. His eyes gazed once more into mine. His tone changed to a quiet plea. "Tell me all you can, in good conscience, for I never know what it is I need to hear until I have heard it." Again, the fervor of his stare unnerved me. "Riddles," I scoffed, trying to speak lightly. Instead, the word seemed to come out as a confirmation of his own. "Riddles," he agreed. "Riddles to which we are the answers, if only we can discover the questions." He rises up and says, "Good night, Fitz. Go to bed. Rest while you can. I need to stay up a bit longer and think. If I can, the brandy has quite gone to my head." "Mine as well." And the fool helps him up, and Fitz is like, "Oh, I always forget how strong he is, despite how thin he looks." And they stumble around a little bit, the fool catching onto his elbow, and Fitz jokingly asks, "Care to dance?"
What I love about this is that Fitz, I believe, is in the women's dance position in this sort of scenario, where the fool's grabbed the elbow and has taken over the hand. And so it's just funny to me because I feel like I always see Fitz as like the more masculine of the two or whatever, but then to have them role reversal here where he's taking a more feminine role of like, even though he's the one asking to dance, like, care to dance? And
then the fool kind of responds to that same position that you were thinking about. As if he bade farewell to a dance partner, he pantomimed a courtly bow over my hand as I drew my fingers from his grip. "Dream of me," he added melodramatically.
Yes.
"Good night," I replied, stoically refusing to be baited.
He's the one who started the joke and he couldn't even continue it. Whatever. But also, what you missed there is that Fool says, "We already do," in reference to that
care
sort
to
of
dance. Yep.
Yeah, care to dance. They're already dancing this sort of weird dance of being prophet and catalyst, and prophet trying to show the catalyst what to do. But he does turn it into a joke, which again goes back to that theory you had, I believe, last chapter, that when the fool feels vulnerable, he sort of puts on that character.
Yeah.
And this was a very open moment. And then he immediately turns it into a joke of "dream of me" in a really dramatic way.
And at the end of this chapter, he's like, "Sleep well, Fitz. I'll keep watch." You know, like he goes overboard with all of these kind of flourishes.
Mm-hmm.
I shook my head at his nonsense and flapped a hand in his direction. Sweet sleep swallowed me. Yeah, so there's that moment where a fool kind of stares at him avidly and intensely, and Fitz has to look away. And then the fool kind of changes the subject and goes like, "Okay, you were talking about the mountains?" And then it's like, "Oh, no, we'll do it tomorrow. Care to dance?" And then the fool adopts his defensive, "Oh, I'm going to go overboard and make Fitz think I'm funny and overdramatic and
that's what works with
shut
Fitz.
down." Yeah, exactly.
It is really interesting if you read it with that sort of lens going into it. And it does make it a little bit more sad as well, because I don't know, I just feel for the fool in this moment where he can't even let himself be open with Fitz.
Yeah. Because he knows how Fitz would react like he does later.
Yeah, touche. I think like there are levels, right? Like,
right.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's the end of that chapter. We get a little bit of Fitz's story. We know he spends a year in the mountains, and then we also know immediately after he spends a year with the Old Blood.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Thank you very much for tuning in this week. If you have thoughts on if the Rooster Crown is wizard wood or skill wrought wood, or I guess, elderling magic would
Yeah.
of some sort, please let us know. You can email us at isfitzhappy@gmail.com. Or, of course, you can always message us or comment on any of our posts on social media. We post every week on Instagram, on Facebook, or on Threads, on Blue Sky. We are on Reddit and on YouTube as well. Please let us know what you got going on in your life. Please let us know what you're thinking about the series. Please rate and review us. And thank you so much for sharing us with everybody else that you know in your life who has read these books. And if you don't know anyone who else in your life who has read these books, make them read these books.
Yes, please do. Also, we did have a friend of one of our friends recommend the Farseer books to them.
That friend, yeah.
And we're like, do they know a really good podcast to listen to? Because our friend said, oh no, that's what Luke and I would do a podcast on. So it was really funny that I was like, oh no, is it one of you? They found us in real life. No. If you do know a friend of our friend, please feel free to let us know. But that would be really funny. Yeah. Thanks for
so
listening.
much.
And yeah, we'll see you next time. All right, let's get to some of the stuff you guys wrote into us. Starting with a comment on episode 252 on Instagram from Melissa talking about how they believe that hedge magic in Realm of the Elderlings starts with a natural gift combined with teaching from witch to apprentice about the inherent qualities of the natural world. So like herbs and minerals.
Yeah, so basically, we had this confirmed last episode from the text from Bastion, I believe.
Yes.
Melissa had this through her, I guess, like canon in her head, but must have picked it up from her readings of it.
Yes.
And just like, this is what I believe. And you are correct.
Yeah. And Melissa also does say that some of the skills of hedge magic could probably be taught to anyone, but a natural sensitivity to other living things is key. And it's probably similar to wit magic in that some people can hear the thoughts of animals. And I think that's a really good example where we have like Ketrikin, who is sort of witted, not really but it's more like through meditation practices that she's more open to nature, but she's never truly fully witted. I don't think she feels the need to have a wit companion, if that makes sense. Whereas with Fitz, it was just so innate and then also nurtured by continuously being around animals and connecting to them and all of that. So I think it's a really good callback to the fact that there are just sort of different levels and sometimes things are able to be taught. I don't know. But it also is interesting because it makes me wonder a lot about Chade and if Chade could be taught hedge magic, because we know he can scry.
Yeah, true.
And that feels like something adjacent to hedge magic, but I don't know. Who knows?
But thank you for adding that to the conversation, Melissa. Appreciate it.
We also had somebody write in on a meme that I have created about how Hap is embarrassed about Fitz being so weird to this hot hedge witch he's trying to set him up with. Somebody commented on how we talk about how Fitz is not the best dad, but can we please talk about how Hap is the best boy?
True.
And
he's a great son.
He is such a good son. I think he is so good. He cares so much about Fitz and making sure that he's making Fitz proud. I think
he's polite. He's a bit sheltered, but he does all of his chores and takes initiative.
He does what's right.
Yep.
I mean, he doesn't do all his chores when he's pouty, but
right. Yeah.
No child is perfect. But also, I think even when it made me think of how even when he is being rebellious later, he is still so like guilty about it, and he's so. I don't know. He's like, come on, Dad, let me live my life. But also, please respect what I want to do and support me, please. So I don't know. I think their relationship is really cute. And I love that they do have such a good bond and loving relationship, and that is his son, you know, even if that's his adopted kid, that's his son. And I love that. Actually, this book has a lot of people taking in adoptive children, which is kind of an interesting thing, I think. that there's a lot of people where they have like those real parent connections with adopted kids, which is real. I just think it's not something you get to see a lot in fantasy or books in general. I feel like usually in nonfiction, the sort of adopted kid is unloved. Like that's the trope, right?
Right.
So it's interesting now that I'm thinking on it that we have this series where there's a bunch of really well-loved adopted kids who are like, that's their parent. Their parent is their adopted parent. And so I think that's kind of a fun little thing to have in there.
So thank you. Is it Purcell Frizzy? Pricey? I don't know. Pronunciations. Thank you very much for the comment on that.
Yes, thank you.
And the shout out to Hap. And then lastly, I do want to bring up a comment on YouTube from episode 228. This is chapter 23 of Ship of Destiny, Flights. So we're back in Ship of Destiny quick and talking about dragons in general. So this is going to stretch my memory because it also relates to Dune, and I have not read all of the books of Dune in a while. So Simon Kelly's comment asks, are dragons like Alia from Dune, with all their preborn memories, are they also an abomination of a being that ultimately fail as an adult, hence the reason why they became extinct? Like dinosaurs, they had their time. So the fool was on a fool's errand all along. So I guess kind of from that, do you think that they had their time in the world and we should move on from dragons? Or is the fool doing something that is correct? Or is it just like, oh, I wish we had better days, I was born in the wrong generation kind of thing?
Fool's wearing Ugg boots and crying over a One Direction poster right now.
So I personally think, like, just to start off the conversation, that we want to sympathize with the fool's direction, right? Because Clarice is so awful to begin with, and they want the extinction of dragons. And maybe they brought about it prematurely, so maybe dragons should still be around in the world. But since we're reading from the perspective we are reading from, the fool is the sympathetic character and the sympathetic mission.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I like the thought exercise.
Yeah, for sure.
I believe that dragons are needed in a way that, like, it's not necessarily because it's great for humans, but because it brings humanity back to humans, if that makes sense.
Precisely because it's bad for humans.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, if you look at Chalced and Jamalia and sort of the world as a whole, there's sort of this trend into violence and hatred that seems to be getting stoked by Clarice, right? Like Regal is who they wanted to take over, and he was full of violence. He had witted people fight in the pits, you know, like he brought the Colosseum. So I think there is a sort of, the path that Clarice has set the world on is going towards destruction and evil and bad. And I don't know how, but I feel as though bringing dragons back into the world diverts that path. And obviously there's still evil and badness in the world. However, that takes sort of a backseat to surviving against dragons. And I feel like
we're appeasing them.
Yeah. And obviously they still had wars during the Elderlings times and there were still fights then. But I think it just, something about it must take the people off the path of violence. And that's what I have to keep thinking about, is that it's sort of, the world is going towards more and more violent of a future, and whatever the dragons puts into the world is taking them away from that. I don't know how it's connected. I don't.
Yeah, it gives humans a little bit more of a common ground to cooperate rather than just want more land. You know, they have a third entity here or a second entity here being like, no, it's my land.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know how that makes people get better equal rights, but somehow it did back in the day. So I don't know. I like to believe that that's why, and that it is that reason. I think there's enough evidence for me to believe that Clarice is on the wrong path, to believe that whatever Fool is doing must be the right path, and not just because I like Beloved and love who they are. It just is more so because everything Claris has done has led to so much pain and suffering.
Yeah, I do agree with you there. And some other reasons that I don't find this thought experiment to go the other way is because from Dune, that character was a human, and you're not supposed to have all of, from being in the womb and an infant know all of futures and everything like
Yeah.
that. There's something that does to your mind. You're not supposed to be born speaking and grow up incredibly quickly as to an adult when you're like 6 or something. That's not supposed to be how that works. For dragons, that's kind of how it works because they live for, I don't know, a decade in the water hunting and stuff. And then they cocoon and come out with all of the memories of a dragon. They've already been through their adolescence, right? It's a different kind of being altogether. So I feel like they're not abominations in that sort of sense, where they're not supposed to be young creatures with all the memories of their ancestors. It feels kind of like that is their cycle. So they were kind of built for it.
But also, I feel like the current class of dragons, they are sort of abominations because of how long they've been alive and suffering.
Yeah, definitely. And they've been around humans too long, so they don't really know how to take care of themselves. They have a lot of growing up to do, which kind of happens in the Rainwild Chronicles, and yet at the same time, they are not like the old dragons were.
Right.
But Icefire and Tintaglia are mating, so there will be old dragons as well.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know if there's going to be a division of the new dragons versus old dragons.
Yeah, so it's interesting to think about kind of the future of dragons once they're reintroduced into this world, but I think it is a good thing, and it's not just a fool's errand, although that is a funny wordplay to go with everything.
Yes.
Because it seems like a fool's errand to revive a species that is
on the brink of extinction.
Exactly.
Was extinct.
Exactly. Completely almost was extinct except for
2.
One unhatched cocoon and one comatose male dragon.
Yeah.
So they've made strides in that field. But I think really it still could be the dragon's time, and it's not past their time because it wasn't a natural disaster and a changing of the world that just killed them. It was partially that, partially also the prescience of a different race kind of directing them to their doom and extinction. Like Claris and the White Prophets were gunning for the extinction of dragons.
Yeah.
It wasn't just the huge cataclysm that changed all of the world. That definitely didn't help, but I think aided together. They kind of ensured that for a long time.
Yeah.
But awesome question and thought there. It's very interesting to kind of question the nature of like the protagonists that you're presented.
Yeah. Are they actually the protagonist?
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you for everyone who writes in. We always love hearing from you, and we will hear from you next week.